Firstly, a factual account of events. On December 2nd, a delegation of Warwick For Free Ed activists attempted to occupy Chancellor Suite 1 ahead of a national day of action in support of free education. We entered the building at 10 p.m, assuming the staff had left. When we arrived, we found that there were members of staff present, and we explained the situation to them and asked them to leave via an accessible exit. They refused, and a confrontation began, where a member of staff threw a student to the floor and assaulted another. Security arrived and told this member of staff to leave. Protesters decided to break the occupation due to concerns for their safety and the presence of staff. The next day, on the National Day of Action, Warwick For Free Ed held a 40-strong demo outside Senate House, comprising of speeches and a banner drop. Following this, we decided to stage a sit-in in the foyer of Senate House and host a non-obstructive seminar on free education. As we entered the building, security tried to forcibly stop us, but we went round them. At some point during this sequence, it is alleged that a security guard was assaulted. No one that took part in this sit-in witnessed this or has seen any evidence that confirms this. It wasn't until hours after the sit-in that we were even made aware of this allegation. The arrival of the police was not anticipated by any prior warning or discussion with Warwick security. Upon entering, the police advanced towards the crowd and proceeded to mass assault us. Collectively, we were pushed in the chest, thrown to the floor, grabbed by the throats, sprayed with CS gas and threatened with tasers. It was a terrifying and emotionally damaging experience which has had a significant impact on both the mental well-being and general welfare of the protesters. And this is especially true for the 3 who were violently arrested and placed under very restrictive bail conditions that separated them from campus and community. The next day, around 1,000 people gathered for a Cops Off Campus demo in response to the police violence. After 40 minutes of speeches, the crowd attempted to force entry to Senate House, which failed. Then the crowd proceeded to Roots Building, where around 250 people occupy part of the top floor and democratically formed initial demands to management. This marked the start of an 8-day-long occupation of this space. During this time, an injunction banning occupation-style protests indefinitely was served, and 2 named students were presented with the possibility of unlimited legal costs. Occupiers forced a negotiations meeting with management, which was utterly farcical, and on Friday the 12th, occupiers left the space. To address specific concerns from the survey, Senate House has historically been a key target for direct action dating back to the birth of the university and holds symbolic value as the location of the council chamber. It is generally preferred to University House as the latter is highly securitized and isolated. Protesters occupied Roots Building to reclaim a space for self-organization, discussion and recovery from December 3rd. Being in a space used for corporate conferences allowed us to apply economic pressure on management, who had consistently refused to engage with other tactics. This space is again symbolic, as it was an occupation of the Roots Building in the 70s, which won the demand of an SU building, which is such a key part of our university today. We are part of the worldwide student movement, and we recognise the right of members of our movement to be involved across institutions and borders. We campaign for both local and national goals, and therefore we think it is totally justified that we receive support on both a local and national scale. On December 3rd, a few members of the student movement from the local community came to support our cause, and at the Cops Off Campus demo, there were activists from Birmingham, Coventry, Oxford, London, Sussex, Manchester, Nottingham and Cambridge, and we are proud that our struggle gained such broad support. We are concerned that university management are fabricating and spreading a perception that Warwick For Free Ed is a violent organisation committed to assaulting members of staff in order to delegitimise our protest. We stand in solidarity with staff, be it academic staff facing a 15% real pay cut, casualised staff effectively paid less than the minimum wage, and the 241 members of staff, including Warwick Conference staff, paid less than the living wage. And we have campaigned on these issues before, and we will continue to do so. We have no intention of threatening or harming staff. They are part of our university and part of our movement. We should not give in to a manufactured division between us. Unfortunately, universities have often responded to legitimate protests with disciplinary action. Most notably at Birmingham, Sussex and University of London, internal sham courts have suspended students and seriously damaged their mental health and life prospects as punishment for daring to dissent. We know Warwick is capable of doing this after taking students to court. Similarly, we know that the police keep extensive files on legitimate protesters, labelling them domestic extremists and placing them under surveillance. In the face of these 2 threats, some students have understandably decided to protect their identities by wearing masks. This is not a crime and is a rational response to police and university repression. We absolutely defend the right of individuals to protect themselves in this way.
We've got limited time.
Time.
The university purports to support democracy. This isn't true. During occupation negotiations, they told us to use democratic channels, and yet the highest forms of student and staff representation are treated with absolute contempt by university management. To focus only on our students' union, we democratically support free education, a better pay deal for staff, a more democratic university structure, lower living costs on campus, and have expressed no confidence in Sir Nigel Thrift. These are all policies supported by a democratic majority, and what have the university done in response? Not much, right? Active campaigns which follow the structures the university advocates end up ignored and frustrated. Look at Fossil Free, who stood outside earlier demanding to be heard. The survey responses are clear. There's an overwhelming expression of the university in crisis. Management and the power structures represented by the university as a whole have presided over the collapse of democratic legitimacy. Ideas with mass support are clearly being ignored, and this situation cannot be allowed to continue. When the normal function of the university becomes authoritarian and damaging to the very community that supports it, that function must not go unchallenged. This is why protests erupt. We, and by we I mean our generation, our organisation and our campus, feel that protesting is the only way in which we can achieve anything. 1,000 came along to the demo on December the 4th in an unprecedented display of political will. If the university wants to move beyond this impasse, they should listen to the democratic structures of our community, primarily student and staff unions, and act on that basis. If they continue trying to ignore us, we will be forced to continue taking action, which means they cannot ignore us. This is the logic behind disruptive protest. It's a last resort which emerges only in response to the failure of other mediating channels. As a result, we absolutely reaffirm the right of the disempowered to disrupt the protests or the processes which disempower and damage them. As we've explored, we have no democratic power. But alongside this, the continued functioning of the university is hurting us. We are subjected not only to the immediate violence of December the 3rd, but also slower and more insidious forms of violence, such as an average debt burden of £44,000 per person upon graduation. All right. The students of Warwick University are all victims of this economic violence, which sells our future short in order to dispossess us. We think the events of last December have to be understood in the context of UK higher education as a whole. The introduction of a neoliberal agenda has fundamentally changed the way in which universities work. This environment has led to dissenting students and staff facing extreme repression. Kettling, assault, arrest, disciplinary procedures, injunctions and the like have become a normal part of dealing with protest on campus. Warwick now has its own plainclothes security officers to act as a secret police. There is an assault on the right to protest, which is taking place on a wide scale as a direct consequence of a vicious programme which seeks to turn education into a business, students into employable graduates, and the police into the paramilitary enforcers of passivity.
And finally, what have we learned? Well, we've learned to not be confident on our own campus. We've learned to not trust the police. We've learned what a taser sounds like. We've learned what CS gas smells like. And above all, we've learned that the right to protest should be defended at all times and in all places.
Thank you.